I cut off my father 4 years ago, and 2 weeks ago he showed up to my job looking for me. I 20F was raised by my mother my entire life. The first 6 years I never knew my father, and he didn't know I even existed. This wasn't at the fault of my mother, though. She tried searching for him, but it took 6 years to finally find him and contact him, letting him know he had a daughter. Once he knew, he and my mom made plans to meet up and finally introduce us. Me being young and having seen pictures of him, I immediately ran up to him in the airport and hugged him. I finally had a dad. As always in most situations, he was the perfect dad, always caring, buying me pretty dresses and fun toys. He was great. Eventually, when my mom was comfortable letting me go across country to stay with him and his mom and stepdad, I would go to his state and stayed for a week. It was at this point, I was still maybe 6 or 7 years old, I noticed he got angry and frustrated a lot. I grew up with mostly women family members, and despite having met my dad a few times, I was still very uncomfortable around him. Yes, I was happy to have a dad, but this man was a stranger to me, and I'm in another state away from my mom and family. My grandma was amazing, and I adored her. I loved it when she was home and hated it when she went to work. When she was gone, I would always ask when she was coming home or if she would be back soon. At some point, this upset my dad. He said, "You are always whining for Grandma. I'm your dad and I'm here. It's like you don't even want to hang out with me." This was the first red flag. As I got older, I noticed more things he did that was very narcissistic, childish, and creepy. When I was 9 or 10, he made comments about my looks, saying I was hot. When we went to see a movie, I sat in the seat closest to the aisle, and he threw a fit, saying how he always sits there, and he should always get the aisle seat, and almost made us leave the theater, 'cause he was butthurt. He's alcoholic. So when we were in the car, I would watch him actively take shots while driving. And he got mad at me for telling him I wasn't comfortable with him texting and driving, and I raised my voice a little, saying, "I don't like it," and yelled at me, saying, "You do not get to talk to me like that. I am your father." One thing I will always remember was Christmas when I was 15. I went to visit him. He and my grandma got into a fight. There was yelling between the two when my grandpa, his stepdad, tried to tell them to calm down. My dad started walking aggressively towards him like he was ready to fight. I yelled at my dad to stop and that I wanted to go home and I wasn't comfortable. He told me I'm not leaving and tried to smash my grandma's keys when she tried to take me home. He ended up punching the wall next to my grandma's head and started begging us not to leave. Of course we left, and my grandma dropped me off at my mom's office job, where I hid under the desk 'cause I refused to leave her side. About a week later, I told him I still wasn't ready to see him, and he got mad, saying he is entitled to his week of Christmas break with me. The final straw was peak COVID, my house burnt down, and I stayed with him and my grandma for a day before going to my aunt's house. 'Cause the first thing they said to us when we arrived was, "What are we going to do with your cat? She isn't declawed." My cat had to stay in the garage, so she didn't scratch up the furniture. Didn't even ask if we were okay. The day after we left, my dad called and asked if I could come over to play board games at my grandma's house. I told him I really wasn't comfortable leaving my mom right now, 'cause I had almost lost her and I wanted to stay with her for a bit. He got mad and started yelling at me about how the fire is over, she is alive, and finding a new place for us was her problem, not mine, and that when I was ready to see my father again to give him a call. I eventually made a lengthy text saying, "I don't want to see you anymore. I don't think seeing you or staying with you is healthy for me mentally. You have scared me my entire life and you are a raging alcoholic, blah blah blah." There was more, but it was so long ago I don't remember everything. He responded saying he stopped drinking 2 weeks prior, and please don't cut me out, blah blah blah. I said no and blocked him. A few weeks after, I got a letter from the county jail saying he got into an accident and got his final DWI and was serving 5 years in prison. For 3 years, he sent me letters and drawings where he hid my name inside the drawings. Eventually, it got to the point where we had to tell the jail that we didn't want to reserve the letters anymore because the anxiety from Reddy and dreading his release made me self-harm. I was terrified of him. Cut to 2023, he was released on parole and ended up showing up at my neighbor's house because he didn't know where we lived exactly and was actually sending the letters from prison to my neighbors, not me. He was going to ask if they sent the letters to me, but luckily the neighbors weren't home. He kept calling me, texting me, but he was still blocked, so I only ever got the voicemails he left. Eventually, he showed up to my retail job where my coworker called me saying, "My dad was there looking for me." Luckily, she knew everything and knew not to say anything. She found out he searched me on LinkedIn, found where I worked, and was hoping to talk to me. She ended up telling him I quite a week ago. He then calls me again and sent an angry voicemail saying, "You know you're an adult now, you should act like one. Seriously, you act like I abuse you or something." I sent him a message saying, "I still stand behind what I said years ago, and I'm sure he has changed, but seeing as how is trying to find me when I wasn't ready, it pushed me away further, and I don't want to see him even more now." The very next day, not even 24 hours later, he creates a new number, trying to contact me, basically saying the same thing he said in his voicemail, to which I replied with the same exact message I sent him the day prior. It's been 2 weeks since, and I haven't heard anything from him, so that's good, but I am looking into a restraining order because the stress, anxiety, and nightmares I have aren't nice, and I can't leave my house without thinking he is waiting outside or that we will run into each other at the store. I live in a small town, so there is a big chance that we might see each other. We are also looking into moving to another town to be safe and to help with my anxiety a little bit.